It is that time again. And actually, this week, we get a UFC card that is pretty crap. I'll be completely honest. But we also get a Bellator card that is really, really, really good. Like so good that I'm actually pondering like not doing my Friday night stream for gaming and watching the fight card. That's how good it is. That's how good it is. And I usually don't like saying good things about Bellator because, being perfectly honest here, Bellator is business like not really much better than the UFC. Like realistically, we've seen the comparison of the language in a Bellator contract versus a UFC contract. They're the UFC without the good parts of the UFC in a lot of ways. So I and they're being, and they've been sold, of course, but and I think it's going to be like a complete dumpster fire. But this card's good. I do want to quickly talk about one bad thing, one good thing. Well, one funny thing. We'll put it that way. The funny thing is the whole Markwayne Mullen, U.S. senator from Oklahoma. I believe it's Oklahoma. Getting into a fight basically on the committee floor against not getting into a fight, but verbally trying to get into a fight with a Teamster union representative. And it's funny because, of course, what I find funny is that when this happened, of course, you had the Markwayne Mullen is a former MMA fighter like crowd come out. It's like, okay, man's 3-0 on the regional scene back in the Wild West days in a state that does not really have an athletic commission. And even in a state that does, like we remember Explode Fight Series out in California, like the absolute crushingest good time you could find. If you wanted to see stupid finishes, you watched Explode, because it would be one person who was either athletic or knew what they were doing, and very seldom both, versus someone who did not know what they were doing and was not athletic. And they would just get absolutely crunked on. That's the thing. Is like it serves to remind me that like there is still like a weird misapprehension, misunderstanding when it comes to regional MMA. Like regional MMA, my guys, is bad. In a word, like there is, if you're listening to this podcast right now, there is nothing stopping you from, like, in certain states in the United States and certain provinces in Canada, getting booked in a professional MMA fight that you can bank on. You can make a couple $100 and you can call yourself an MMA fighter. I am living proof of this being the case. And it just means nothing. It just absolutely means nothing. There are guys like Jay Ellis who made a career out of just getting their arses kicked 90 plus times on the regional MMA scene, and they're still doing it. And then on the dark side, we passed the 1 month or the 1 year anniversary of the passing away of Rumble Johnson, and this brings up an interesting problem. I have a general do not speak ill of the dead policy. And as a result, I'm not going to litigate that part of it. But it is kind of weird to watch a lot of people on social media, journalists, analysts, content creators within the MMA sphere, social media personalities, whatever, pull out the, like, Rumble Johnson was a great and kind man approach. My guys, we know he wasn't. You can pay tribute to the fighter that is Anthony Rumble Johnson. Here, I'll do it for you. Anthony Rumble Johnson was a unique talent in MMA. He was an incredibly powerful human being in terms of his ability to hit things, and the sort of guy that, like, realistically, for a time, I thought might be the answer to John Jones. A guy who had the power and size to actually, take the very small windows of risk adversity that John Jones presents and actually do something with them. Like, that's how good in the cage he was. I could say all of that and be very, very nice and just not reference him as a person. That would be my suggestion. Let's talk about Bellator 301. 301. Where's this one coming from? Chicago, Illinois. Okay. So Yaroslav Amosov versus Jason Jackson is your main event. It is hard for me to get psyched for an Amosov fight just because he's so far above the rest of his division outside of the UFC. Like, he just wins. You put him up against a 170er outside of the UFC, he wins. There you go. There's the answer. That's the fancy breakdown right there. He's just like, he's a very competent kickboxer, very competent sambo guy, good top control, can be dangerous, can be threatening, can submit people. He is the archetype, prototype of what if kind of what a fighter should be. Like, how well-rounded yet somehow deep in almost every situation that he is. The answers he can come up with. There are very few questions you can ask Yaroslav Amosov in the cage, and he does not have an answer for them. That he hasn't shown an answer for already. Like, that's the impressiveness of this. He is actually the guy I would love to see fight Leon Edwards. Actually, seriously, if the UFC could sign him away from Bellator and give him an immediate title shot, I would not complain. That is how good this guy is. And this is not meaning to disrespect Jason Jackson. He's really big. He's also a fairly well-rounded, competent fighter. I like him. I enjoy his fights. It's just that, like, I don't see what he asks of Amosov that Amosov isn't going to readily have an answer for. Like, that's the problem. Like, I'm not saying he's going to get slaughtered. I'm not saying he's going to look like he doesn't belong in there, because he does. But it's just like, okay, yes, you have a 78.5-inch reach, which is 3.5 inches longer than me. You're 2 inches taller than me. You're 6'1". You're a massive wingspan welterweight. But is that really enough to really stagnate in any real shape or form the game of Yaroslav Amosov? And I think the answer is no. So yeah, I've got to take Amosov, probably by decision. He's not an amazing finisher, and Jackson is very, very tough. Amosov is a minus 420 to 500 favorite, and Jackson is plus 280 to plus 360. Would not bet, would not touch it. Usual betting spiel: do not bet what you cannot afford to lose, because this is MMA. Things are very, very unpredictable. Like, betting on sports in general is a fairly fool's errand, but I would say MMA is, of any sport, well, in like 4-ounce Muay Thai, the most prone to just chaos. That realistically, and this will come up on the UFC card a lot. There's a lot of guys who I'm going to be saying is like, are they good? Maybe. And that happens a lot in MMA. Not the case in this particular fight. Because we really do know both these guys. Like, there's not a lot of questions, but like, there is still random stuff that can happen between two established fighters in a fight and really change the complexion of a fight. Sergio Pettis, Patchy Mix, looking forward to this fight, loving it. Sergio Pettis is the guy that I think has always looked as a letdown because of his brother. He was the guy who came in and like, oh man, this is Anthony Pettis' brother. Sergio, he's grown up in the sport. He's got the better technique. He's going to be Anthony 2.0. And it turns out he just wasn't really nearly as athletic. Like, he can't do Anthony Pettis things is what it comes down to. But he is a way better technician. Like, his boxing is tighter. His kickboxing tighter. His wrestling much better. Much, much, much better. And his grappling is probably about the same. I think Anthony Pettis' grappling is actually a bit of a highly underrated part of his game. And then with Patchy Mix, you have a guy who is huge. 5'11" at bantamweight is huge. And Pettis also has the problem where, like, he's more of a 130 guy. Like, he's a guy that realistically looks like he should be at flyweight, but like at the same time has a hard time making flyweight. Like, it just doesn't click. And obviously that means he's generally smaller. And then, like, when you get like these giants like Patchy Mix and a very good Bellator 135 division, by the way, you could argue, this is a hot take. You could argue that there's like 5 or 6 guys in the Bellator 135 pound ranks that could legitimately challenge for a UFC title. Not like right away, but like, you give them time, you give them a couple fights in the UFC, they might surprise you. They might stun you. This is like the one division in the world that the UFC is properly rivaled on, in my opinion. That's a hot take. By another promotion. Anyways, Patchy Mix, super dynamic fighter, very dangerous, both on the feet and on the ground. Like super sneaky submission guy, super powerful striker guy. Obviously super long, very uncomfortable to exchange with for any long period of time because of that height and that reach. He's not the best technician in any regard. Like there's a rough athlete's edge to like all of his striking and his grappling. The sort of guy who has developed the game that he has because he can, because of the physical gifts, the ability to be huge at a weight class, and so on. But every time out, he does look better. Like legitimately, every fight that I see Apache Mix is going on is like there's something that wasn't there before. There's something new, something refined. If not entirely new, then like just like refined to the point where like this was a very rough thing that you did before, and now it's a little bit better. It's still rough, still not anyone's idea of a textbook fighter, but a guy who is on the right path and making the right steps every single time out, and I appreciate that. And that's why I'm picking him by submission. The big thing here is that like Pettis is a game plan driven fighter. Like he's a guy who I think in order to win has to have a really, really, really good feel for what the opposing fighter is going to do. And I don't think you can ever have that with Nix because so much, he's just a sponge. He's 30 years old and he's still like developing like a prospect. It's stunning. So Nix by submission. He is the favorite, minus 192 to minus 230. That's a bettable line. And plus 145 to plus 184 for Pettis. Raufeon Stots is my is my pick of the card and of the week. He is the underdog. Not a big underdog, mind you. Like plus 100 to plus 122 is not a big underdog. And I can't get the plus 122 line because they don't accept bets from Canada. But he's facing Damien Sabatello, who he's beaten before. Controversial. You may remember this was the 50-45 Douglas Crosby card. That was BS. And I don't see what Sabatello would do differently. Sabatello, like the problem with Sabatello, don't get me wrong, like dude, 5'10" bantamweight, exceptional wrestler, exceptional athlete, confident, persistent, all these good things, good motor. But like a full understanding of like early 2000s MMA, which is like I get the takedown and I win. Like no considerations for damage. Like he's got finishes and stuff, so like he can do damage, but like he is quite happy to do nothing. And I get why this fight was rebooked because their trash talk was not great in my opinion, but like I am not the judge of trash talk because I find most of it I find most of it to not be very good. And but it definitely created buzz on social media and in the casual fan base. It did its job. And that's why we're 11 months later in a rematch. But like, I don't think anything fundamentally has changed. Stots is better at everything except for wrestling. And Sabatello's not a vicious wrestler, not a venomous wrestler, not a damaging wrestler. So I just see Stots being able to survive, get up a couple times, dominate the stand-up because Sabatello's stand-up is quite bad, and pick up a decision. And like I said, having Sabatello at a minus 122 to minus 145 favorite, don't get it. I don't get it. He lost the first fight. It was only a split because a judge was completely incompetent and corrupt and can't do their job. AJ McKee Jr. versus Sydney Outlaw. Man, I can never get around the idea that like Sydney Outlaw keeps getting positioned as like a really good fighter. And don't get me wrong, he has all the physical gifts to be a really good fighter. He's actually quite large at lightweight. Like this is a guy who I've seen fight at 170 and not look out of place. He's quite large, powerful, and strong. And of course, McKee is a guy coming up from featherweight. Not for the first time, but like, a former featherweight who's now fighting at lightweight. And is just better than Outlaw at everything, but the question is, can he deal with the size and the strength and the power? I think he will. I've got him by TKO. There's a lot of defensive flaws to Outlaw. There's a lot of ability to hit him really hard. I don't get me wrong. I think there's a cockiness in AJ McKee that is probably going to get reality checked one or two times here, where like he just does something kind of a little bit dumb, and Outlaw just clubs him one. But as long as that doesn't get him finished, he's just the better fighter, and he is a fantastic athlete in his own right. It's not like he's just a technician or whatever. He's a good technician and a good athlete. He's phenomenal. He's a guy the UFC was interested in at one point. That should tell you something. And, he is one of the best fighters outside of the UFC. He is a minus 250 to minus 280 favorite, and Outlaw coming in at plus 175 to plus 230. Patricky Pitbull, the lesser Pitbull, versus Alexander Shabliy. Taking Shabliy. Everything I kind of said about Yaroslav Amosov is like kind of applicable to Shabliy. Good boxing, not a bad kicker, good wrestler, vicious submission hunter when he wants to be, some vicious ground and pound, like, just the complete package. And Pitbull, 37 years old, violence incarnate for a long, long, long time, but like even in his youth, a guy that was prone to getting like, beat because of his lack of, defense and frankly lack of size. Because like the Pitbull brothers have both kind of always been very, very undersized. It's like kind of weird that like Patricio's fought at 155, but like even Patricky, 5'7", not big at all. Shabliy takes him apart, picks up the W. There you go. TKO is what I'm going to go with for a method. And he is a minus 500 to minus 800 favorite. Pitbull plus 360 plus 500. Talking about a couple of select prelims, you got Tyrell Fortune versus Marcelo Gome. I would hope Fortune's going to win, but like he's lost fights. He has zero reasons to lose. He should just be able to out athlete and out grapple or out wrestle Marcelo Gome. Like, dude is an amazing stud of a fighter who, I don't know. There's just something that doesn't click for him in the cage, I guess. Yeah, I'm taking him. He's a small favorite. Denise Kielholtz is an underdog that I will be placing a bet on because she's fighting Sumiko Inaba. Inaba is perfectly shiny with a 6-0 record and whatever. Like, she's undefeated, but her wins mean nothing. Her best win is over Vita Arteaga, who is not a very good fighter. Denise Kielholtz is. She's like actually a really, really, really good kickboxer. And isn't out of place in like other things. Like, she can grapple, she can wrestle. Now I will say the threat of a wrestling and grappling game does tend to shut her striking down a little bit, and actually is a key to victory, even without out grappling her. Excuse me. But yeah, I've got to take Kielholtz. If she loses, will I be shocked? No, but I won't. I won't pick it. There you go. Super stud athletes Archie Colgan, Timur Kizriev, and Ramazan Kurgamagomedov are all on the card. They should all win. And Islam Mamedov versus Kilis Mota is a pretty fun fight. I'm taking Mamedov to win the fight. He's a better wrestler, and just generally has faced a higher level of competition. But Mota's, fun, bettable dog if you want to go with that. And Carrie Melendez probably will get her stand-up layup win because she's on the card. And as a general rule, they don't bilk her in tough fights, and she's fighting a girl who's 3-3 that I don't really know a ton about, so she'll probably get the win there. And not really going to break the rest of it down, but like it's a pretty good card. I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, just going to take a quick look at the undercard here for a little bit more to see if there's anything. I like Mike Hamill and Tim Wilde. It's a good fight. Two guys I'm reasonably interested in, but like realistically, it's not a big one to get off your couch for. Jefferson Pontus, I'm not recognizing him, but he is 6-0. See some. Yeah, I don't know. Just looks like a guy coming off the Brazilian scene. Name does not ring a bell, but every time I see an undefeated Brazilian on a Bellator card, I kind of think like crossover from the BJJ world or something. But in this case, I don't think that's the case. All right, so that's Bellator 301. And let's move on to UFC Allen versus Craig, the Bear Jew versus the Child Beater. Main event: Paul Craig versus Brendan Allen, 185-pound fight. This is the second time we've seen Paul Craig at 185 after he beat Andre Muniz. I didn't think the 185 cut was a good idea for Paul Craig, to be honest. I thought it would be one, he looked a little bit too large to be trying the cut, and two, kind of just thought it was pointless for Paul Craig because like his game is like this, submission snatching guy. There's not a lot of power to him. There's not a lot of strength to him. It was kind of like, okay, you're bigger, but like, is that really going to translate to anything in the cage? I've done a 180. Like he went out there and made fairly easy work of Andre Muniz, which is nice. But I do still think his his ceiling is fundamentally the same. He's the guy in the weight class that does BJJ. He's just now bigger. He's still a pretty bad striker, but like he can be confident and aggressive with it every so often. He's not a particularly good wrestler either. Like he's not a great takedown artist. He's not even really a great grappler. Like people get a little bit heated and angry about that, Paul Craig fans, when I say that. But like realistically, he's not. And what I mean by that is that he's a good submission hunter. Very good submission hunter. But like in terms of scrambling and top control, control grappling, it's not amazing. And like also paired with, again, not amazing takedowns. And being able to grapple has not been a path to victory against Brendan Allen, like at all. Like the guy has fought guys who are good grapplers, Bruno Silva, Andre Muniz, Christoph Yatko, Kevin Holland, submitted all of those, and beat guys like Jacob Malkoun and Kyle Daukas by decision, who tried to grapple him predominantly. And it's not like Brendan Allen's a great striker by any means, but like he's a better striker, a better form striker than Paul Craig. I think he has a better takedown game than Paul Craig even. And also like on the size side of things, he's only an inch shorter. Doesn't look all that much smaller, honestly. And I got Brendan Allen by submission. I don't really see a Paul Craig win. I see how Paul Craig wins. I want to make that quite clear. It's like catching an armbar or a triangle choke or something. Like the alternate timelines where Craig wins are very obvious as to the method. But it just feels like that shouldn't work against Brendan Allen at all. And he is a massive favorite, 425 minus 425 to minus 450, plus 310 to plus 350 on Craig. I'm staying away from it. Jake Matthews versus Michael Morales, and not really all that interested in this fight. This feels like the Max Griffin fight again for Morales, but worse. Because the thing is that Jake Matthews, Andre Filo fight aside, has always been spotty. There are moments in basically every fight where I'm like, hey, Jake Matthews has put something like real nice together there. Like, a real slick, striking, smooth bit there. And it goes instantly away. It doesn't stick around at all. There's a lack of consistency there. There's a lack of a lot of things there. And when it comes down to it, his best game is like top control grappling, and he's fighting Michael Morales, who's actually a really good wrestler and a really good athlete and really physical. You're not going to hoss him around. You would actually need to be a very good wrestler to take down and control Michael Morales. Morales is rough. He is a work in progress. He's a 24-year-old prospect, but like, he's so fast. He's powerful. Seems to have a pretty good chin. Like, he's been chin checked a little bit. It doesn't seem like it's I'm not gonna say it's made of stone or like titanium or whatever, but it does seem to be made of something definitively stiffer than like glass and fiberglass. And I've got to go with Morales by decision. Matthews is still quite durable, and Morales is fairly predictable. Like he's kind of one note. There's not a lot of nuance, not a lot of setup to his game. his finishes rely on just like pure power, and I don't think that's really going to be enough to stop Matthews. But minus 300 to minus 333 favorite. Matthews plus 230 to plus 260. Jordan Leavitt, Chase Hooper. I don't like this fight. I would like this as a grappling match, but as an MMA fight, I honestly can't help but think that both guys are gonna be like, you know what? This is the chance to show my striking off. It's gonna be so bad because I'm not even sure that Hooper can consistently take Leavitt down. I'm not sure that Leavitt's gonna want to consistently take Hooper down. It's just a mess. I literally flipped a coin on this one because I was like, man, if this ends up in a striking battle, I have no idea who wins. And if this ends up in a grappling battle, I also still don't really have a strong idea of who wins. I do think Hooper is a little bit better as a grappler, a little bit, but I think Leavitt's a better wrestler, and I think Leavitt's a better top control guy. So I don't know. Leavitt by decision won the coin flip, and Hooper is the way wider favorite than it should be, minus 205 to minus 235, and Leavitt's plus 163 to plus 180. I don't know. I think Hooper is riding really high off that Nick Fiore win for some reason. I don't really get it. Like the guy's lightweight run so far has been, getting bashed in by Steve Garcia and then beating a guy who's just really bad. And like, I know. Leavitt lost to Paddy Pimblett and looked pretty bad doing it. But like, as much as I don't like Paddy Pimblett, like he is that's a tougher fight than Jay Hooper. Like, let's be real. And I know that Leavitt's wins are not all that impressive. Victor Martinez, Trey Ogden, who we're talking about later, and Matt Sales. But still, yeah, I think there's like a lot of Hooper, like kind of residual hype still going on that one. But yeah, anyways, Peyton Talbot versus Nick Aguirre. Why is this on the main card? These guys are a combined 0-1 of the UFC. I want to say this is Talbot's debut, and I'm pretty sure Aguirre lost his only fight. Am I wrong on that? I'm mistaken. Yeah, he lost to Daniel Argueta. It's this is that classic one where it's like Peyton Talbot looks good on the regional scene. Like he can crush this fairly well. He's a pretty big guy for the weight class. He seems like he has power. Seems like he has dynamicism. Seems like he can wrestle a little bit. Seems like he can grab a little bit. Has all the makings of like a guy who might be good, maybe, but it's just against nobody. It's just very, very unproven. Like, okay, he did stop Christian Rivas, who's not a terrible fighter by any means, but like also not a good one. Like Rivas himself is a can crusher as well. So like doesn't really do much. And then like Nick Aguirre, also a can crusher, guy who came into the UFC, lost to Daniel Argueta when he was kind of like just kind of reality check that he couldn't bully him. I don't think he can bully Talbot, and Talbot will probably go to decision with him because like when he got to the Dana White Contender Series, he couldn't get the finish. I don't know. Like Aguirre does seem like reasonably durable, if nothing else. But yeah, Talbot by decision. He's minus 654 to minus 800. I think he's one of the biggest favorites on the card, if not the biggest. Just scrolling down here a little bit. Yeah, he is the biggest favorite on the card. Shouldn't be. We'll get to who should be later. But yeah. I don't know. It feels like a fight that shouldn't be on the main card at all. And Aguirre's a plus 450 to 550 underdog. Amanda Ribas versus Luanna Pinheiro. Actually pretty hyped for this fight. Both these girls have their problems in the sense that they're somewhat clunky strikers that, depending on the situation, don't seem to really have great answers. Don't seem to have really great instincts either. But they are both fairly athletic. They are both, fairly solidly based in a grappling game. He boss is back at 115, it appears, which is I don't want to say it's where it is because she said she's had a hard time with the 115 cut before, and obviously, like the science behind women's weight cutting is not good. But it does feel like at 125 there are just too many people that are just too big and just kind of do what Macy Barber did to her and just like kind of push her shit in. And don't get me wrong, that's still a pretty high ceiling at 125, but like 115 is like this girl could fight for a title. Legitimately fight for a title at 115. And I'm taking her by decision here. Presumably, she'll be able to shut down any kind of grappling avenues that Pinheiro chases. I think she's the better grappler of the two, and I do think she's the better striker of the two. Pinheiro is impressive, and I want to see a good fight. I want to see some new things out of her, and I would not be ashamed at all if she were to pick up the W here. But Ribas has proven herself at a bit of a higher level as like a properly elite talent at strawweight if she can sort things out on a weight cutting level. Hibosh is the minus 238 to minus 250 favorite. Pinheiro plus 185 to plus 200. Uros Medic versus, I'm going to try this here, Mktembik Orabai. I'm not going to say that name again. Yeah, I'm picking Medic. Orabai, I said it again, is a can crusher on the regional scene out of Kyrgyzstan. There's no reason to believe that he's going to be particularly good. And he's coming in on short notice. Medic is not a fighter I have a ton of belief in either, if I'm being like 100% honest. I just thought he was kind of a big lightweight who's now fighting at welterweight, he's got some power, he's got some wild striking. He's fun. But I honestly didn't really think that he would be. I didn't think he'd beat Matt Summelsberger, put it that way. He'll TKO him here. I don't know why he's only plus 115 to plus 120, and Orabai is, or pardon me, opposite way around. Minus 115 to minus 120, plus 140. I don't. Hang on. I think I got this written down wrong. Orabai versus Medic. No, Medic is the underdog. Oh my god, I'm betting the money. The guy who has UFC wins against the short notice replacement, and Orabai is the favorite. Ooh, oh my lord. Okay, that makes no sense. Nicholas Mata versus Trey Ogden. Complete opposites clashing here. Mata is super aggressive in the shoot box mold. Power everything. Power striking, power takedowns, power grappling. Boom, 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 boom. Not a good enough athlete to make it work. That being said, he's fighting Trey Ogden, and I'm going to have a really, really hard time picking Trey Ogden in any fight. It's not that I struggle to find him. Like I can see ways of him winning. He's a 5'11" lightweight. He's generally long enough and works a nice neutralizing style and heavy on the jab, and he runs the Marathon MMA gym, which is putting out some pretty decent game plans, it seems. So seems like a smart guy with some good counter wrestling, good scrambling. It's just at lightweight, he just has no X factor athleticism, zero whatsoever. His advantages are like cardio, which doesn't really work at lightweight, especially if you're like a passive cardio machine, and just being kind of big. I've got to pick Moda by decision because Ogden's pretty durable, but I don't know. I don't have I have very little faith in Moda. Like if Moda just gets like kind of neutralized here and just kind of like counterpunched to death, it's not going to surprise me. Moda is the favorite, minus 130 to minus 146. Ogden is a plus 105 to plus 115 underdog, if you can call that an underdog. Lucy Podolova versus Eileen Perez. Battle of two people that I don't really have any faith in because like their wins are all I steamrolled someone who couldn't physically compete with me. And when I lose, it's because somebody can physically compete with me. And my wins are over less physical people than the person I'm fighting against, Sarah Moras, Jiyeon Kim, in the case of Podolova, and at the ghost of Ashley Evan Smith in the case of Eileen Perez. So I don't know. I feel like we're going to find out like in the first like minute, like they're going to clinch up, and whoever wins that clinch and whoever can bully the other one will probably win the fight. And that's what 135 women's fighting is right now. I'll go with Pudilova by decision. I just like her better. I find Perez very off-putting. Very, very off-putting. Well, the whole queen of the twerk thing is lame. That being said, it's gotten her a minus 185 to minus 200 bet line. So there you go. And Pudilova plus 152 to plus 163. Also, Pudilova is just a little bit bigger. She's 5'8". Like at 5'5", Perez does seem a little bit small for the division. She is like a fire hydrant, don't get me wrong, but I don't know. I'm not looking forward to it. I accept that these type of fights have to happen if the UFC is going to build a 135 division, and I want them to. I want women's MMA to flourish, but it is like building any weight class that doesn't really exist. It is a painful process. Mick Parkin versus Caio Machado. This is kind of again in that same ballpark of like, I honestly don't really know. Like Mick Parkin came in and looked pretty good against Jamal Pokes. And he did really, really well. He had me a little bit excited. And I really wanted to see him fight somebody who is going to build on that kind of excitement. Somebody who I had faith would test Parkin in some ways and make some things happen. He seems like a good grappler. He seems like a pretty athletic guy. He seems like a pretty powerful striker and pretty considered. And he fought at a pretty high pace for 15 minutes, which is, for heavyweight, very good cardio. And just like Machado's not that. Like he's crushed some regional seasoned dudes who are largely smaller than him, for one thing. And he's kind of like just a grappler who doesn't have a really good takedown game. Like his wins come from like arm bars and stuff. I gotta go with Parkin by TKO, but like I don't think I'm gonna learn anything out of this fight, which is what I really wanted from a Parkin fight. I know he's 28 years old, which in heavyweight years is like a teenager, but I don't know. It's just weird that you go from Jamal Pokes, who has his limitations, absolutely, but is a proven commodity, and you go down to Caio Machado. Just doesn't make any sense. Jonathan Pearce versus Joanderson Brito. This is an interesting fight. This should be on the main card instead of particularly Talbot versus Aguirre. Jonathan Pearce is the prototype of a guy who is really hardworking, does not seem like an amazing athlete, but is also huge for the weight class, and generally speaking, makes the right decisions, weaponizes pace in a fairly effective way, weaponizes his size in a fairly effective way to be like a crushing grappler and volume striker. Brito is, in a way, my least favorite type of fighter because, like, dude is a stud athlete who just does dumb stuff. And sometimes it works. And with a proper coaching prospect or like a proper coaching system and eye to technique and game planning and so on, Brito would be a monster. And he's the only thing holding him back is basically him and his training environment. I am picking Pearce here by decision, but I will say this: Brito is a much better athlete, a much more powerful fighter than anyone that Pearce has managed to do his pressure, volume striking game to. This is very much a test. Very much looking forward to it. Make it happen. It's a very simple dynamic. I haven't spent a lot of time talking about the fight, but it is very interesting to see how that's going to work out because, you know, this is a division of athletes. At some point, Pearce is going to have to prove that he can beat one of them if he's going to go anywhere. Pearce is the favorite, minus 125 to minus 138, and Brito plus 100 to plus 110 feels about right. Chad Anheliger versus Jose All Day Johnson. He is All Day Johnson, right? This is the one, right? Or am I thinking of like Jose all day? am I? Am I? I'm not. I'm not, no. He's Lobo Solitario, the solitary wolf. Right. Yeah. I don't know why. There is actually a Jose all day Johnson. It's kind of messing me up. But they're kind of very similar fighters too. Anyways, Chan Helger is the substandard athlete of the bantamweight division, or one of them, but a guy who has developed a game that is actually really, really complete. He's got good counter striking, just a solid fundamental kickboxing game, works the low kicks very, very well, puts on pace very well, scrambles well, doesn't accept bottom position. He is all that he can be, and I applaud it. Jose Johnson, on the face of it, seems like a really decent prospect at 6 foot tall bantamweight. He's only 28 years old. He's been around for what seems like forever, though, in terms of fight count. There are flashes of athletic ability where, like, it's like, this guy's kind of fast. This guy's kind of powerful. And then you realize that, like, there's also, in every prolonged stage, just a lack of core strength and, like, technical depth. And every time he's taken a step up, outside of stunningly beating Jack Cartwright, he's lost. Like, there's a lot of Mana Martinez and Ronnie Lawrence and what Chad Anhilger wants to do. Like, they're better versions of it, but there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that. And Helger is used to fighting guys taller than him, but there is still an idea that like a 7.5 reach advantage will be a possible telling factor. And I think that's probably the only reason that Johnson is a minus 190 to minus 215 favorite. And then Helger plus 155 to plus 170. I've got to back my Canadian boy, though. Chad Anhilger. I'm not even just the Canadian part. I got to back the guy that I think is making all the right decisions against the guy who I think fundamentally is not making right decisions. So, Anhilger to slowly take him apart, win a decision. Another underdog pick for me. We'll see what happens. Charles Johnson versus Rafael Estevan. My read on Charles Johnson has been so weird. Because, like, when he came in, I was like, there is a complete lack of urgency in this guy, and he's never going to win in the UFC. He's going to look competitive in, like, every fight he's in, and he's just never going to win. And then he got wins. He beat Jovo Jumagulov. He beat, he beat Jimmy Flick, which I would have called. And it was like, hey, this guy's maybe got something. He's picking it up. He's showing a little bit more pace. And then, like, the Ode Osborne fights and the Cody Durden fights, like, killed my buzz again. And so I'm kind of, like, done with him at this point. He's still potentially really good. Like, there's a good boxing game there. There's a pretty reasonable takedown game. There's a very good takedown defense game. There's good scrambling, getting back to his fight. The bare bones of a quality flyweight game is there. It just needs initiative. It needs urgency. It needs work rate. And that's not ever consistently there, it seems, outside of the Jumagula fight. Estevan has a lot of concerns with me. He botched a weight cut back in May. He's a defensive mess. He brings volume. He is kind of the opposite. Like, my guy brings he brings all the insistency, all the volume, all the power, all the aggression to the table, and with good scrambling and takedowns. That's also an incredibly great basis for a quality flyweight game. It's just he's incredibly undefensive, and Johnson hits pretty hard on the counter. So I'm gonna go with Estevan by decision, but I don't know if Estevan's pace and viciousness and aggression, sorry, can bring out the good Charles Johnson, there's a chance he wins this. Here's the fight that should be the biggest underdog of the card. Oh, by the way, odds. 130, minus 133 to minus 152 on Estevan, plus 106 to plus 125 on Johnson. This is the fight that should be the biggest one gap of the card, and that is Lucas Alexander versus Jeka Saragi. Jeka Saragi is bad. He is undersized for the weight class. He is I will say this, he is a creative striker, and there's a little bit of funness there, but he cannot wrestle. He cannot grapple off his back. He lost to the road to the UFC tournament to Ansel Shabliy, who is the dude who lost to Mike Breeden because he got barked at. He just shouldn't be here. I get it. He's an Indonesian prop. Like that, the entire lightweight road to the UFC tournament was a bunch of guys who did not belong, but like represented markets the UFC wanted to enter into in a bigger way. And as a result, these guys are just going to kind of get embarrassed for a bit. And Sergey is definitely that. Alexander is a functionally good volume kickboxer. He's got power. He can grapple. He can take people down. He can throw strikes. He could just absolutely wrestle Sergey to oblivion. He's not perfect. There's some defensive things that are bad about him. He walks into stuff a lot. But Sergey doesn't have the power, nor the nuance, nor honestly the counter game to make that happen. So Alexander TKO should steamroll him, make it happen. Don't know why it's only minus 500 to minus 560 on Alexander. Sergey is plus 350 to plus 400. I mean, I wouldn't bet on it anyways, but still. And the opener for the night will be Christian Leroy Duncan versus Dennis Tialunen. A absolute mess of a meme fight at 185. Christian Leroy Duncan fights like he's the idea of a black belt magazine fighter. Like there was jokes back in the day when Dontel Mays came to the UFC and still there, that he was a guy who fought like he'd read Black Belt magazine and that was like it. Christian Leroy Duncan's like the same. Like there is nothing that should stop this guy from being a very good fighter. He is incredibly athletic. He is huge. He has a 79-inch reach at middleweight. It's all there, and it's just he'll pick the dumbest thing to do at any given time. It's gonna get him losses in the UFC. It's essentially why I lost to Armin Petrosyan. Like there was no actual reason for him to lose to Armin Petrosyan. Petrosyan's got like a 71-inch reach or something. It's like you have 8 inches of reach over this guy. You're a better athlete. You are a bigger, stronger guy, and Petrosyan doesn't present a takedown threat, and you somehow lost. Tialunen is also a wacky striker who does a lot of stupid things as well. He can show surprising depth as a wrestler at times. Like, I don't know, there's once or twice in every fight where like Tialunen does something I'm like, I didn't know you could do that. Why don't you do that all the time? And then he doesn't, but like, can be out grappled pretty easily. And yeah, I just see this being kind of like a really, 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 really awkward fight. And like at some point, I think Duncan might accidentally figure out that he can control Tialunen on the mat. I've got Duncan by decision. He is a minus 385 to minus 400 favorite. I might put a little bit on Tialunen at plus 285 to 295 because I don't trust either guy. I don't trust either of these guys to be a minus 400 favorite against like anything. That brings us to an end of the prediction part of this one. Check out my links down below to the right or to the left, wherever the platform is. This podcast can currently be found on Spotify, YouTube, Acast, and Anchor. And I will see you after the UFC fights. And we'll also talk about the Bellator fights then as well, because I'm assuming, to be honest, there will be more to talk about from Bellator. Because it's a way better and higher profile card.